Hello Warhammer explorers. Before we dive in, hit subscribe so the next transmission isn't lost to the warp. He watches the Astronomicon stutter as a foreign law ripples across the warp like a bell note of gilded command. He traces its source to a distant plane ruled by a tree of light and an outer will that writes obedience into causality. He chooses to enter not for conquest, but to quarantine a law that could chain mankind's future. He inscribes a webway spur with prime numbers of denial and binds a choir of memory ghosts to hold the door. On the fifth mark, the breach opens, a seam of burning gold and cold, and he steps through. The sky is the wrong kind of holy. Lendal, royal capital, glitters beneath a canopy of amber haze, its buttresses and domes bathed in light shed by an impossible tree whose roots veer like rivers through stone. Workers on parapets drop their brushes. A perfumer freezes mid-swirl, amber mist seeping from a vial. A child points at the new sun, tearing a line across noon. He falls like a torch javelin, heat sheath rippling. The air peels with organ swell pressure. His armor drinks radiance and radiates its own. Not the Erdtree's honeyed grace, but something harsher, star-born, forged for empire. He hits the air hard enough to thunder before his boots touch stone, shockwaves sweeping banners flat, birds whirling in a tight panicked knot. On a high causeway, the draconic tree sentinel reins his mount with a curse, visor flashing. The giant tree's light reacts to him the way a guard dog reacts to an unfamiliar scent. Hackles of grace rise across the city. Golden motes coalesce into watchful eyes at the edges of vision. Far away, around a round table that is not a table, Gideon Offner the All-Knowing raises a hand toward a bowl of water and sees a new star contaminate his maps. He lands on the divine bridge. Stone fractures in a clean ring. Aura hits the ground first. It presses the dust flat and blows it to the perimeter, where it hangs as a halo of grit. His boots follow with a hollow strike, and he stands straight, tall as an oath, plated in auramite that remembers older empires. His eyes are the gold of fury held in check. The Erdtree marks him with a shimmer of motes that touch and recoil, as if tasting iron. He smells resin, ash, the sweetness of perfumed oils, and underneath that, blood baked into sun-warm stone. Sound resolves. Bells pealing, men shouting, horses screaming. Something bigger than any horse drawing breath like thunder. He turns his head. The shadow on the city grows. An ancient dragon screams as it breaks from cloud. Its body is a mountain of scarred bronze, wings pitted from lightning wars older than the capital beneath it. The spear that will one day be named Grandsax is a promise in its throat. The golden bolt it winds there is a lance meant to nail the city to its own shadow. The Emperor watches the charge of power build, sees the arc of it, the timing. He is already moving. Air peels away from him as he launches. He leaves the ground as a sunlit shock. A vertical line carved by will, his leap so clean it brings the world up to meet him. The dragon's pupils contract as the man becomes light. For a moment the giant beast believes it remembers him. He meets the storm with a raised hand. His palm opens and his will compresses the air into a disk only he can see. A field of anti-vectors and angles scrawled in thought. The dragon spits. Lightning like a god spear hits that disk and bends, squeezes, splits into a coronal hiss that streaks aside and buries itself harmlessly in a domed basilica already scorched by saints' candles. Pain flares across his forearm, where the Golden Order's principle couples with his field. Order doesn't like what he is. It tries to write a name on him. It finds no agreement. He feels the signature cut lines into his nerves, like thorns. He answers. He disappears from Dragon's sight and appears as an argument at its throat. His blade is out. The sun lives on its edge. He carves a clean line through scale, cutting not matter but momentum, robbing the beast of the angle it needs to recover. It tumbles a wing length and beats, staggering the air, and crashes into a tower, stone tumbling like blocks thrown by a child. He does not let it rise. On the bridge, a figure in shaggy fur and burnished steel watches with frank, wild eyes. Nephili Lu, warrior raised by Gideon but born to storm, has sprinted from the capital walls at the first bell. She holds a great axe that has split trolls. She can hear the new man's scream of aura in her bones like a second heartbeat. "Move," she yells to the stunned perfumers and halberdiers ringed in awe. "Form a line, shields high." Her voice cuts shock. Men obey. The draconic tree sentinel spurs his steed into a rearing pivot and plants his great halberd, trying to read whether the falling star is foe or gift. Gideon speaks into a room full of echoes. "Enya," he says to the finger reader, whose hands rest on ragged digits that never fully rest. A stranger of grace without grace. Enya's lips crease. She tilts her head as if listening to a chorus only she can hear, and then she snaps, brittle and sharp as dried wood. The greater will attends. The song changes. The dragon uncoils from the tower with a building's worth of stone draped upon it. It swings its head toward the bridge where the man stands between city and ruin. Its mind is a furnace. It roars lightning again, not at a disc this time, but at a human who has interposed himself between breath and prey. He intercepts with his body. He takes the bolt on his chest as if daring it to write him into this world's scripture. The field holds, but less. The law of this place slides its chalk across his armor and refuses to be erased. Heat blooms as a flower made of knives under his ribs. For a moment, his light misfires. He bleeds brightness like sparks blown from a grinder. He makes that pain account in his cadence and leaps again. His left hand sketches an arc of numbers in air. His right brings the blade down. He draws the dragon's beam into his slash, folds it, runs it along his blade, and returns it to sender. The beast's throat illuminates from the inside like a lantern. It howls, choking. He plants his boots on empty air and kicks off the sky. He lands on the dragon's neck, as one would land on a raging horse that can fly and keeps his weight low, ankle biting for purchase at scale joints. His blade carves a shallow trench through the thickness of pride that 1,000 years of flight lays over a spine. The dragon bucks. He rides. Its wings smash air into walls. He drives his will like nails through its instincts, pinning them down to simple, slow reactions. It whips to bash him into a buttress. He steps sideways on a gust and leaves behind an after-image that takes the hit like a ghost. Stone erupting in dust and a fan of broken masonry. He chooses mercy under control. He slides his blade through the corner of one eye, a shallow cut that waterlines pain. The beast recoils with animal surprise. In that pocket of hesitation, he puts a hand to his brow and speaks, not with tongue, but with pressure and picture. "This is not your die. Turn. Go." The ancient dragon flinches at the thought more than the wound. It is not a command it has heard from humans. It knows the scent of tyrants and priests. This is neither. The big head trembles. He sees in the deep plain past rage a memory of sky without trees. He gives it that. It surges upward, tearing stone with its tail, and banks away from the bridge. He does not chase. He lets the beast choose corridors in the bright. It will come back someday with a spear in its name and a score to settle. But not now. Now it flees. Codex note. Ancient dragon physiology vents lightning through paired organs along the jaw. altering the vector of stored charge with directed intent, can induce a self-stun sufficient to break a strike pattern. Silence arrives late, limping, after the roar recedes. The city draws a breath it had been hoarding. He is already cataloguing costs. The thorns the Order tried to write into him continue to scratch under his skin. He can feel new laws trying to format parts of his soul like a foreign archive. He will need to bleed off conflict somehow, or it will accumulate. He sheathes his blade. It goes away as if stepping into another angle, not a scabbard. Stand down, the draconic tree sentinel calls to his men, voice iron in a bucket. His mount stamps, breath steaming. The captain lands his halberd butt with a hollow thunk, slow in ritual, cautious in tone. Stranger, you interposed. I did, the Emperor says. His voice is quiet, precise. The voice of a man who has stood in 1,000 command tents and talked over 1,000 maps. He looks at the night, at the woman with the axe, at the soldiers watching him as if the world had been upgraded. Your city is a target of the sky. I will help defend it. On whose grace? The question knifes in from a new angle. Nephili Lu, who has already holstered doubt to make room for action, looks sideways. A spectral scribe walks a few steps forward. A small, bent-in woman under a tower of braided hair, the ghost of Enya given legs by some conduit. Her fingers twitch as if counting debts. No finger shook for you. He turns his head. 2 fingers hulk in a shadow behind her like bundled roots that learn numbers. The digits flex and crackle with a tapping that is not a language and is a language. One made of calibration and decree. He feels behind that tap, a gaze as cold as vacuum and as warm as a directive. The greater will, noticing a misprint. I am not of your will, he says, and the sentence leaves a taste of iron on every tongue within earshot. I am custodian of another elsewhere. I am here to quarantine. Your law reaches outward like a tree that will crack a wall. It must be pruned. The draconic tree. Sentinel takes a half step back without meaning to. He has the instincts of a soldier who has seen men decide awful things in front of him. Nephili Lu steps forward to fill the gap, chin lifted, great axe resting against one shoulder. We needed your hand 3 breaths ago, she says. You gave it. That buys a hearing. Gideon Offner would also hear, says a voice as dry and cutting as paper. A projection shivers into presence. A tall man robed in dull scholar's cloth, bald scalp gleaming, eyes hard with the comfort of being correct. The all-knowing pinches a ring between thumb and forefinger as if testing its yield. Where there is new grace, there is consequence. Come to the round table, stranger, and present your terms, or stay here and find who sets them for you. The Emperor looks out across the city again, at the ringways and terraces, at statues and golden drifts of pollen light. He doesn't know these people. He knows the shape of power. He knows that if the dragon came today, something else rides in on the weather tomorrow. The wind brings the smell of blood and copper from below, but not fresh blood. Some stink, old rot. The sewers complain, not with water, but with a choir of rasping throats. Your tomorrow is early, he says, not turning his head. A column of red smoke rides up from a grate 2 terraces down. Men are running now with purpose. The first sanguine noble rises from the undercity like a prayer that stopped midway and turned itself inside out, robes dripping with ichor, knife bright as hunger. The incursion is a braid. Most disciples, the dynasty of Bloodflame, pick the city's soft underbelly. On the outer wall, Godskin apostles unfurl black flame as casual as a yawn, that hungry fire licking at banners, eager to learn timber. And above, far above, the dragon is not alone. Lesser old dragons wheel, eyes bright with the arithmetic of cowardice and courage. Someone coordinated this, or perhaps The city's sins simply found the same hour. Plan, the Emperor says, because the fastest way to have a plan is to say the word and make the future conform to it. His voice changes. It drops into command register, the one made for tight halls full of mortal men who will live if they agree with him in time. You, he points at the draconic tree sentinel, hold the gate. Anchor here. Make a kill box along the divine bridge. Stack shields, perfume a cadre, lay a curtain. He gestures at the perfumers, whose leader, a woman with scars where she took her own aerosol to the face once, flinches into discipline. You, Nefeli Lu, pick 20 who run, not think, plug the sewer mouths, kill the nobles fast, aim for the hands, disarm the ritual. Nefeli grins like a wolf. My kind of work. Gideon Ofnir, the Emperor says, and the all-knowing's eyes narrow at being named by a stranger who had a dragon under his boot 5 breaths ago. Can you make a broadcast to your knights across the capital? I can make all things knowable that are worth knowing, Gideon says, brittle as a blade. Tell them godskins are at the outer wall. Their flame eats cohesion. Attack on 2 flanks, disperse. Use javelins to break their rhythm. Do not lock shields against them for long. The heat will learn your shape and own it. And tell them this. Closure of nodes will draw attention. Closure of what? He points at a minor Erdtree visible beyond the colonnade, its crown a slight echo of the great canopy. Nodes, he says. Anchors of your law. The godskins want to unwrite your past and write their god's hunger in it. Keep them from the roots. Gideon makes a sound that is not agreement or disagreement. It is a placeholder that buys him time to feel like he is still curating the world. And you, he asks, as if the answer isn't obvious. I will stop the sky, the Emperor says simply, and I will test your law. He moves with clarity that splits seconds. He takes 3 steps and is gone. He has not teleported. He has found a path between ticks of the metronome and chosen it. He becomes part of the air's calculation. He arrives at the outer wall where a godskin apostle unfurls black flame, a curtain of void-lit hunger that erases oil paint and carvings without smoke. Priests somewhere were taught to love that effect. The apostle is a thin, soft-voiced thing inside skin that remembers the bodies it wore yesterday. It turns slow, as if everything it looks at should be honored to be looked at. New meat, it says in a voice stretched like a drumhead. Its blade speaks in whispers that are all appetite. He lifts no blade at first. He opens his hand and the space between them becomes a machine. The godskin's fire reaches the machine and stops as if shy. He changes a constant by an idea, and the black flame gutters like a candle in a submarine. The apostle blinks as if seeing the room without its favorite color for the first time. Not a god, it says. A little hiss of surprise. A priest of a far altar. A surgeon, he says, because sometimes the truth is more useful than greatness. He closes the machine and the godskin's own blade becomes heavy. Heavy in the old way, the way of things that obey friction. The apostle lunges as if gravity cannot be true for it, and discovers that today gravity is very, very interested in it. The Emperor sidesteps and lets the blade slide past with the kind of economy men forget when they fall in love with fire. He crushes the apostle's wrist with a grip that reads bones and writes fractures. He knows the pressure to break the radius, because he has done this on a different planet, with a different theology, and bones are bones. The godskin tries to become long and white and wrapping, a serpent of fat that wants to find a neck. He denies the transformation with a blade that says no. The apostle becomes only a screaming person, and then a quiet residue. Black flame snaps out like a snuffed match. He turns his head, and the world catches up with him. Across the capital, Nefeli Lu smashes her shoulder into an iron grate and drops into a stairwell full of red steam. Her 20 run with her because she has told them to, and because her joy is contagious. The first sanguine noble lifts his dagger to cut an invisible curtain and right the door. Nephili hurls a throwing axe and knocks the knife out of his hand, then is there, hip deep in his space, turning with her whole back into a split that starts at rib 7 and ends at the wet floor. "Hands," she shouts. "Sever hands." It becomes doctrine. Pick, strike, move, strike again. Keep the ritual from writing itself into the air. At the divine bridge, the draconic tree sentinel plants his halberd and becomes a hinge. He is very good at being a hinge. He holds, he pivots, he kills. Men stack shields in 2 ranks, making a corridor with spears like bristle. Perfume mist drifts in a precise low cloud, sweet and deadly, and the first wing of lesser dragons dives into air laced with taste that makes their sinuses revolt and their instincts stall. The Emperor ascends on will alone. He writes a ladder in pressure and climbs it. Ancient dragons circle, choosing waver and strike, the 2 strategies available to cowardly gods. He picks the worst of them and makes an example. He does not revel, he demonstrates. An old dragon with a wing ragged from 18 storms opens its mouth to laugh lightning. The Emperor steps through its laugh into its breath and taps it under the jaw with the pommel of his blade, a tiny kiss. The tap is a command more than a hit. The dragon's jaw closes. Lightning detonates inside the palace of its own skull. It drops 10 meters in shock. He rides the drop down and lets the dragon teach the others on his behalf. Respect is a survival trick. He keeps count. He kills only where dissuasion fails. He pins one dragon to a crenellation with a bolt borrowed from another and leaves it like a pinned moth. He blinds another in one eye and then tilts its head toward the horizon and says go, and it does. He makes of the sky a space where attacking feels expensive and leaving feels correct. Pain keeps writing up his arm. The Golden Order's law rubs against his and friction is heat. He can smell cooked metal under his breastplate. The Erdtree pulses, golden and terrible, counting him like a heartbeat it wants to regulate. He is very far from his throne and the machine that drinks a galaxy's worth of souls to keep a thing alive. He has to be his own throne here. He lands on a dome where a godskin flame has eaten gilding in an ugly scar. He looks to the round table, which is not in any direction, but is in every one if you know the path. Gideon's face manifests again, a narrow slice in air among drifting ash. The nobles are thinning, Gideon says. He does not sound grateful. He sounds intrigued. Your orders spread faster than smoke. Men do as you say even without grace. That will interest the fingers. The fingers of trees are roots, the Emperor says. Roots break stone to drink. He wipes ash from his lips. It tastes like ambition. Your claim is quarantine, Gideon says. Quarantine from what? The greater will is not a rot. It is order. Order brings peace. Order brings obedience to those who write it, the Emperor says. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His words arrive in Gideon's head like a coin dropped into a glass. If your will reaches outward, it will find what it can own. I am here to keep it from owning my species. Your species invited a dragon to the table, Gideon says dryly, watching a lesser ancient flee with a frantic flap. You argue like a lord. Enya will say the will is pleased to be argued with. It loves to be proven right. I don't love anything that needs to be proven right, the Emperor says, and places a hand against the dome, feeling the hum of grace through stone. He pushes back, just enough to feel the law push harder, like a bull testing a fence. That pressure is a promise. The fence will break or he will. The godskin fire collapses in knots where the apostles fall. Perfumer plumes hold the bridge. Nephili Lu emerges from a sewer slick with red vapor and laughs with her whole chest. More, she bellows to the exhausted, while our arms still work. The day edges toward a ragged quiet. He returns to the divine bridge last. He does this because people should see commanders come home alive. It is a recipe more than a virtue. Men make sounds that are not cheers because their mouths are too dry for that. The draconic tree sentinel inclines his head a narrow fraction. Perfumer hands tuck vials away with a miser's tenderness. Nephili wipes her axe on her thigh and leaves an arc of red that she'll wear like a badge until it cracks. Gideon's projection dims and then pricks back into bright. "Round table," he says. "Now, before the day breathes stories without you in them." "Later," Ennia's ghost says, interrupting. She leans forward, eyes milky and bright at once, listening to a tapping only she can hear. The fingers murmur. The greater will's eye is not an eye but a word. It wants to grammar you, new one. "Then we speak," the Emperor says, feeling the thorns tick inside him like a clock. He looks at Nephili Lu. "You fought fast," he says. "Your city should be lucky to have you." "Some cities make their own luck," she says, and then softer, like a wish that surprised itself by being spoken aloud. "Some cities get a lord who deserves them." He takes that as the grace it is, human, not cosmic. He nods to the draconic tree sentinel, who is already arranging his men to pretend they did not watch a man walk on air. He turns away, and the air thickens with the path to the round table, an invisible hallway lined with absence. Walking that corridor is like stepping through history written in breath. He smells incense burned on 7,000 altars. He tastes the nickel of blood oaths. He feels the static of prayers that were never answered and made monsters out of the unanswered. Moving through it rubs his soul raw against local law. His lights leak again, a slow bleed of sun. He arrives in a room that refuses to cast a perfect shadow. The round table is less a place than an agreement to act like one. Knights stand without standing. Banners hang without walls. The table itself is a piece of wood famous because everyone says it is. Gideon Ofnir stands at the far side and looks at him like a problem he can break into parts. Enia sits, fingers whispering, eyes too bright. "Stranger," Gideon says, as if testing whether the word still fits. "You intervened, you commanded, you made our laws behave badly. Name yourself." He doesn't give the oldest name or the true work name. He gives the name mortals can hold. "I am the Emperor of mankind." The words are a shape that makes some people straighten without deciding to. Even in this world, the title does a thing. It makes the room imagine a dome, a city, a race. It makes the conversation move like a column under orders. Gideon blinks once, like a man checking a fact against a library he carries behind his eyes. "A large claim," he says. "You argue quarantine. Your mechanism is a web of numbers and exploit of law." "It is math," the Emperor says. "Your golden order is a syllogism written by something that loves obedience. I found a contradiction and stepped through it." Ennia's fingers write in the air. "The greater will is a warmth that make cold laws gentle," she says. The recitation of a catechism and a personal memory wrestling in her voice. It does not devour. It civilizes. "The dragons learned to write light into law once," the Emperor says, looking not armed at Enia, but at the table. "They thought that made them authors. Then a will arrived that write better and took the pen. Today I saw dragons remember humility." Gideon tilts his head. "You speak like a man who loves order. Your world would not have an emperor without order. Why oppose it here?" "Because order is a tool," the Emperor says. He steps forward and lays his hands on the table that is an idea and feels the idea push back. Ownership, fealty, old triumph, newer hunger. In the wrong hands, it crushes the people it is built to lift. Your will is not your people. Whose are you? Gideon asks. He is not mocking. He is a man who wants to know which river leads where. I am mine, the Emperor says, and that is almost true. He is also a throne, a father, a tyrant when he must be, a liar when he needs to be, a keeper of a light that has scorched a million souls who never asked to be warmed. And I am theirs, Ennia's fingers still. The fingers say you may walk, she breathes, but you will be watched by eyes that are not pearls and not flames. You have already been watched. You came into the song, and the song will test you for harmony. Gideon's mouth clicks. Harmony is another word for victory, he says, but not quite to her. The Emperor looks down at his hands. He turns them over. Tiny lines have appeared on his palms, like lifelines rewritten by a man with a compass. The lines are the Erdtree's attempt to label him. This is a limb. This is an intention. This is a fate. He flexes. The lines do not fade. They burn faintly, like letters ironed into skin. The cost, he says, mostly to himself. Gideon hears anyway. Cost, he asks, quick as greed, because men who love knowledge love debt lists. What does it cost you to be here? Principal bleed, the Emperor says. He doesn't mind teaching when the audience is bright. Your law rubs my law. The friction is heat. Too much, and either the law burns off me, or I burn a hole in your world. Neither of us wants either outcome. Enia smiles with all the pity in the world and none. Then you will move carefully, she says. The will loves a careful step. He feels the city behind the round table settle into a tense dusk. Fires out, blood up, voices low. The dragon cry is gone. Instead, there is humming like wind in a bell. The Erdtree hums. It is not music, but it makes the body remember music. We can use you, Gideon says, tasting each word like a man tasting an expensive wine he didn't buy. Under counsel, not leash. He glances at Enia. Guidance. What counsel? The Emperor asks. Your will loves obedience. I am not obedient. Counsel like maps, Gideon says. We know our enemies. We know their operators. We know their gods. Mol bleeds people under the city to feed a god of blood. Rykard eats warriors to be a serpent. The godskins burn history to feed a god named Death that was skinned once and remembers the feel. And above them, a will that writes law. Behind them, other wills that hate law. You fight law with law. We can give you the correct targets. The Emperor hears the plan behind the pitch. Harness surprise. Aim it at old problems. See if it makes a new problem later. He respects it. He does not trust it. He has been both the sword and the palace that asked the sword to stay in the library. I will coordinate, he says, but you do not own my hand. Ownership is crude, Gideon says, smiling like a man who has just been told the price of a horse and knows he can pay in secrets. We prefer consensus. Consensus backed by fingers, Enia says serenely. He turns away from the table and toward a door that isn't. There is a phase in the air, where the city's geometry runs out and another city's begins. He steps toward it and feels the pain in his arm notch up. A little click, the way a clock tooth engages. He will need to find a bleed point soon, a ritual, a conversation, a fight that spends the right kind of power so it doesn't pool in the wrong places. He pauses on threshold and looks back at Nephili, who is coming quiet, face still bright with sewer work. She leans on her axe like a woman leaning on a piece of herself. Come find me, she says, as if they had made a promise and he'd left it on the bridge. If you need an arm in a street, mine is free. He nods once, the nod of a man who has acknowledged a contract with nobody present to witness it. He steps through the knot door and the city reasserts itself around him, humid with sap and human hope. Night drops. It doesn't fall like a curtain in Lendel. It blooms like ink in water. Lamps catch. Moths decide to be meteors. People stand in doorways and tell each other what they saw, and already the stories begin to put names on things that didn't have them this morning. He moves the city's edge and looks at the Erdtree's shadow. The shadow is too precise. Shadows should be smudges. This one has a will. He files that under later. Below, the sanguine incursion becomes a sporadic cough, then a memory, then a stain that will not wash, then a folk curse men will spit when their drain clogs. The godskins retreat, carrying their dead like paper lanterns, weeping black flame into scarves. The dragons are real again, which is to say, not gods. They go to count their teeth. He stands on a parapet that looks down on a minor plaza, where men sweep glass with willow brooms. His aura contracts out of courtesy. It hurts more when he shrinks it. He keeps it small. A child, the same one who pointed up this morning, slips out from behind a pillar. She carries a candle stub in both hands like a priest. Her dress is patched in 3 patterns. She looks at him with the open cruelty of children who do not fear because they do not understand. "Are you a lord?" she asks. "I am a man," he says, "who stands in a place where a lord should stand." She thinks about that. "Morgoth stands there," she says, with the clean knowledge of a child who knows the city, the way a hand knows a splinter. He's mean. He's ours. He's mean because he has to be. He's mean because the shape of his power asks for it, the Emperor says, and hears his own voice tell him a thing that should be carved into a throne. She nods, impressed at being answered like a person. "Thank you for not letting the big lizard eat the bell tower," she says solemnly, and holds out the candle as if he might need it in case his sun goes out. He kneels because he is not a god, and kneeling lets some people stand taller. He takes the candle. His hand is hot. The wax softens and prints his skin. He gives it back. "Keep your light," he says. "You will need it." She scampers away. He watches the candle flicker in air that is not entirely air, and he sees, inside that tiny flame, the way the Erdtree's light edits the colors of the world, selecting angles it prefers. He will need to pick his fights inside that editing bay. The night is not safe. That is not a complaint. In unsafe nights, men do things worth singing about. He turns toward the city's north, where another minor Erdtree anchors a ward. He feels something there that is watching him with neither hatred nor love. Curiosity made of equations. He recognizes the maneuver. It is how he evaluates a tool. He walks that way with his pain as a metronome, counting off steps and costs. He is tired in the way that metal gets tired, stress lines not sagging. He will not sleep because he rarely does. He will plan because he always does. Across the night, far from Lendel, under ruins and dreams, a black blade gnaws a prayer. The prayer is a contradiction. It knows about destinies and erasures. It will meet him in another act and hurt him in a way that is hard to cauterize. For now, he feels the city loosen. Men breathe again. Women put kettles on. The draconic tree sentinel leans just once against a wall and lets the weight of the halberd pull his shoulder joints open. Nephili Lu tips her head back and pours water on her face and grins at the stars. The Emperor of Mankind walks into Lendel's night with a debt already counting down in his bones, and the calm knowledge that tomorrow he will stop being careful. He will do it because the law of this place asked him to sing. He will do it because he has a better song. He will do it because if he does not, the tree will grow until it finds his home and wraps its roots around his throne and asks to see its papers. Dawn is not clean in Lendel. It arrives in sheets of pollen and priest light. He stands on a balcony with his hand on the stone, reading the city through its vibrations. Wagons move, barracks breathe. Water runs in channels cut by boredom and war. He writes a day in his head. He draws the first line at a minor Erdtree. Root wardens bow when they see him, not because they love him, but because the light around him makes the eye accept angles it usually refuses. He lifts a palm and touches the trunk. The bark is warm and wrong. It carries the weight of a decision that has already been made for everyone. He does not hate it. He adjusts to it. Curtain, he says to the perfumer cadre forming a crescent in the plaza. The cadre chief, scarred woman with steady hands, signals. A thin, sugar-sweet haze spreads waist-high, a non-lethal field to mark boundary. No flame near the root, he adds. No steel, unless it is thinking. He opens space in front of the tree and breathes. The field he makes is not a shield or a weapon. It is a veto. It is a circle where the order's grammar misses a comma. Black flame, if thrown in, would stumble on its own hunger and remember to be only heat. Godskin knives, if stabbed in, would jab into a simple world where knives hurt and nothing larger learns. He keeps it small. He keeps it righteous. Godskins test him anyway. Soft sandals whisper. An apostle steps into the plaza like a rumor admits it's real. A noble flanks, cheeks slick with devotional oil. Scarlet shrug tied down at the shoulder with thin, greedy fingers. They speak as one voice through two mouths, a ritual that eats individual inflection so the god fits. Root, they murmur. Root becomes flesh, becomes worm, becomes God. Your light will feed well. That's the problem, he says and lifts his hand. Black flame seeks arcs and inverts them. He gives it a flat line. The flame bends, shudders, and becomes a harmless black smoke that curls down and hangs like spoiled incense. The noble blinks, then lunges. Its blade whispers through his aura with the disgust of fat touching cold water. He slides an inch aside, catches the wrist, and writes a new set of joints into a hand that thought it knew its own bones. The apostle sings and unrolls, turning into an obscene ribbon. He denies volume with a cut that speaks like arithmetic. You are here, and here is thin, and thin tears. The ribbon tries to wrap and fails. It sags into human in a hurry and screams like a brittle kettle breaking. He kicks the noble's knee sideways, hears the crack, and lowers both enemies to the stone without letting either touch root or perfume a line. Breath. No one else needed to bleed. He turns to the wardens. This node is quarantined, he says, and the words are simple enough to get in and stay. No rites, no offerings, no touching the bark with love or anger. If anyone comes with knives or threadbare doctrine, you whistle. I will hear it. The perfumer chief raises a hand. Sir, she says, a little surprised she called him that. What does the fence cost you? Heat, he says. Principle against principle. I can pay for a while. He pays by making the line hold for 6 minutes after he steps away. That is expensive. The tiny letters on his palms warm like coals. He keeps walking. He sketches 4 more fences that morning. Controlled, clean. On the 4th, a Godskin cohort tries a coordinated rush, using the song the Erdtree itself hums as tempo. He steals a beat out of their hymn and drops it sideways. The cohort trips on the measure as if the floor changed slope. He disarms grandly and returns bodies to ground like parcels that will be picked up later. By noon, the city has a ring of no around things that are used to yes. At the Divine Bridge, he meets the draconic tree sentinel in a hack-sweaty calm between tasks. The knight's eyes sit deeper in their sockets today. He salutes with minimal movement to conserve oil and pride. You shave a god with a carpenter's patience, the sentinel says. I approve. You held the hinge, the emperor says. Approval paid both ways. They stand for a breath and watch a pair of birds discover wind for the 100th time. Then he goes where war is waged with speeches. The round table exists the way the city breathes. It pretends itself into form. He steps through a corridor of absence and stands before men and women who have learned to confuse information with safety. Gideon Ofnir leans over the table that is not a table and taps the grain like it can hear him. "You return fire without lighting the city," Gideon says, almost like thanks and almost like he is annoyed to have to say it. Reports: 8 godskins neutralized, 3 taken, no civilian roastings. The root wardens are shaking from not doing their little rites. That last part will worry Enya. "The will loves rights," Enya says, voice papery, smile paper cut. "They teach hands to be precise. They teach hands to be idle when precision is uncomfortable," the Emperor says. He looks around the circle. Faces, armor, cloth. The wrong kind of condescension does not sit here. The right kind does. Your enemy mix is opportunistic. Blood cult in the drains. Skin priests at the walls. Dragons learning shame. Someone weighed today and found a place to push. "Gideon weighs every day," Nephili says from the doorway. Hair damp, axe clean, eyes alive. He pushes with words. "I prefer a stick." "Your stick hits the right targets," Gideon says mildly. "Ideally, those targets align with the Order." "Order is not a god," Brother Corin says, emerging from a shadow like a sermon that found a throat. He carries a book that he has copied by hand so many times, his wrists should have knots in them. It is how we live with gods. It is the way roads obey feet. It is the way mornings arrive without asking. The Emperor nods. He does not smile. Respect does not need grins. Order keeps the weak alive between the strong. It lets bakers bake and shepherds count. It teaches thieves to be subtle and soldiers to be on time. Without it, war is the only language. Enya folds her fingers around the fingers. They twitch. She listens. "The greater will hears," she says. "It is pleased by praise. It is suspicious of edits written by strangers." "Your will writes edits on strangers by default," he says. "I oppose conquests that don't start by asking." Gideon tips his head. "You steal the best of Corin's argument and then deny his conclusion. Efficient." He points with 2 fingers at the Emperor's palms. "And yet the law writes its draft on you as you speak. The burns creep. You move and your sentence is being graded." "You see well," the Emperor says. "The costs are not metaphors." "Let's put costs in neat fights," Nephili suggests brightly, because she hears silence as an invitation to action, not a rope for someone to hang speech on. "Give us a target. Godskins at the second gate. I can move." Gideon glances sideways at her and chooses to pay for the energy with a plan. "We hold a council, so let us counsel." "The stranger." He catches himself on the word and changes it. "A political micro-gesture." The Emperor says, "Quarantine." I say we wield. Enya says test. Corin says surrender to doctrine. Sentinel says guard. Nephili says strike. Radagon would say unify by hammering. Marika would say betray until it feels like holy change. The greater will says nothing with mouths. Enya interrupts. Sharp. It indicates displeasure with the fences, Gideon says, and pleasure with the dragon chastisements. It is a god that likes triumphs it claims and hates limits it did not write. The Emperor hears it plain, a request to sit inside the order and make it win. He balances it against quarantine and the bleed under his skin and the parts of him that grew a civilization out of bones and won't bow to a tree. We can hold both, he says. We can stop fire from becoming law while we let mortals be safe. We can use the will's machines without knuckling to its intentions. So you become what Gideon wishes he were, Nephili says, delighted. A man with authority and no leash. Not leash, Gideon says, a touch aggrieved. Consensus. Consensus that starts with your list and ends with my signature, the Emperor replies, not unkind, because this is how councils build workable enemies out of friends. They break to tasks in the way soldiers do, when words give them permission to stop pretending stoicism is action. The Emperor turns toward a door that is not and stops. He feels a draft in the round table. There shouldn't be drafts in ideas. Light thins. The lamps don't gutter. They are simply convinced that they have already burned this hour and need not do it again. Shadows lengthen like knives growing out of skin. A cold slips under armor that isn't temperature. It is the wrong level of the world touching the right one. He pivots before the assassin arrives. It is not a human first. It is a cut. The shape comes through the cut like water through a new notch carved in stone. Black knife, edge already wet with grammar that kills. A glow faint as old gold crawls along the blade's spine. Destined death, stolen once and still roving like a gilt with legs. The Emperor meets blade with palm. Not enough. Cold travels through his gauntlet like policy. Irresistible, indifferent. It is not heat that eats flesh. It is a syllable erasing a noun. The knife grazes him, and something important that does not have blood runs out. His aura stutters. His vision loses a color he did not know he enjoyed until it's gone. He moves the assassin's wrist past its plan. The body attached is small, fast, perfectly sure. It rolls under his follow-up and cuts at the tendon behind his knee. He rotates shin and hamstring inside his own skin, and the cut takes only air and memory. It speaks once, because zealots like to be known, even as shadows. Your immortality is theft, it says in a woman's voice hardened by having been right too often at night. Return what you stole from death. I owe death nothing, he says, not angry, only clarifying. I owe the living everything. She vanishes between frames and reappears behind Gideon. The Emperor arrives first, heat bleeding, and forces the angle of her arm until the knife points at the floor, where her own shadow refuses to catch it. He pushes. The blade kisses stone. The stone refuses to be dead in the right way and simply chips. That saves the round table from becoming a funeral. She leaves, because good assassins do not die for points made. They kill for points saved. She vanishes not into invisibility, but into a thickness of air where seeing is illegal. The cold remains. It has work to do. His wound does not close. It pours a slow trickle of darkness that is not blood and not meaning. It is subtraction. Nephili is already at his side. You're cut, she says, and her voice is tight in a way he has not heard yet. I am edited, he says. Ennia's mouth opens and closes. She listens to the fingers. They are not calm. For the first time, the great bundled roots look like frightened animals who do not know where the whip will land. The will remembers the night, she whispers. It recoils. It cowers under its own light and looks out through others' eyes. Gideon's hands tremble once, then steady, the tremble confined to the past like he intends to confine everything that hurts him. Destined death, he says. Still loose, still sharp. You can be killed. I can be ended, the Emperor says. That is different, but yes, it corrupts my anchor. It rewrites my regeneration clause into a cancellation. The cut is a hole in the idea of me, and holes do not fill by wanting. He lowers into a seat, because sitting is the correct geometry to manage this wound. Standing is pride. Sitting is tactics. Nephili plants herself like a buttress at his flank and promises to keep the air honest. Power scaling interlude. The rune of death is not a poison or a heat. It is a prime cancellation that forces living systems to accept end-state math, where my physiology habitually declines entropy by brute will and warp anchor. Destined death deletes the anchor's claim and forces the bookkeeper to close the account. It interferes with recursion. My self-remembering becomes a thread that frays at the thought, and power spent to heal becomes interest paid into the wound. It does not care about armor, it cares about assertion. The only counter is either a higher law or a clever misdirection of the invoice. Your wound will take, Brother Corin says, pallid but present. His book trembles now, not his hands. It will teach humility. It will teach constraint. The Emperor breathes through the pain and feels the edges stop widening as they try to widen. We need to take the knife that did this and the mind that points it away from the equation. Black knives do not sit in citadels, Gideon says. They sit in your lungs when you think you can breathe after a sprint. They sit in your bed when you choose to sleep, where your body knows the smell. They sit in places where God's eyes are lazy. Night's sacred ground, Ainsel, Nokron, when it remembers to exist. I can find their steps, the Emperor says. Their blade tasted my light. It will hum for a time while it enjoys that discomfort. I can follow the hum. You cannot go alone, Nephili says. I am never alone, he says, not meaning guards. You can bleed alone, she replies, and the sentence finds a chink in his conceptual armor, not because it changes the fact, but because it tells him how it looks. He accepts the correction. He stands. The room rebalances, everyone taking a little piece of his weight, because that is how leadership works when done in front of witnesses. He dismisses half a dozen offers with a nod and keeps Nephili's without comment. He accepts 2 perfumers because they know how to mark air with taste he can read. He ignores the sentinel's silent hope to be included. This hunt wants soft feet, not hinges. Before you go, Gideon says, urgent like a man who hears a door closing on his ability to be relevant. Hear my counsel. Mercy is a luxury in a city with dragons and knives. Survival is a doctrine we cannot argue with. If your fences bleed you, they are an error. We should burn our enemies before they learn to love our limits. Mercy is civilizational profit, the Emperor says. A line he has written as policy and as prayer. Killing to solve a math problem is fast and destructive. Teaching a city to help itself is slow and strong. I will kill where it saves many. I will forbid killing where it only makes us feel powerful. You can praise or fear. Both are wasted time. Freedom erodes doctrine, Corin says. We are a people because of rules. Freedom is the right to choose which rules apply to you, the Emperor answers. I will not let an outer will choose for you. I will not let you think that means you don't need rules. You speak like Marika when she was still clever, Enia says, not unkind. Remember, she became stone to save a lie she taught herself. He inclines his head. I remember. They leave the round table and the city receives them with a shiver. The Emperor keeps his aura low enough to avoid triggering the Erdtree's defensive music. The wound drinks some of his light as they walk. He feeds it measured wattage so it doesn't take. He refuses to love its edges. Pain is a clerk. He will not promote it to priest. The trail is a thin hum only he can hear. It threads down arcades and past brass saints. It vanishes at corners and reappears in water where stones remember deaths they did not see. Nephili moves half a step ahead with her axe slung low, Joy clamped tight under duty. The perfumers mark corners with faint, oily roses that will help a second wave follow if needed. At a mausoleum carved with lies about piety, the hum thickens. The door is a slab that wants to be pushed by ritual. He pushes with shoulder. Stone moves because physics will always accept sincerity from strong hands. Inside, stale, holy air and a stair spiraling into a place the sun has not signed off on. Night waits at the bottom like a lawyer, patient and prepackaged. There is light, technically. It is just not useful. The kind of light that forgets to bring shadows. Carvings of women in masks watch with their mouths too small to be human. A statue remembers a man who died without death and tells everyone else it's possible. The emperor breathes out. The air tastes like disappointment that has decided to make a career out of itself. They enter night's sacred ground. Ghosts here are not the friendly, local kind. They are memories that didn't finish and decided to become a climate. The floor is full of coins people threw in wishing wells. The wells were wells for wishing, not water. He keeps his senses layered. One layer for blades, one for ideas. The wound hums as if night were a tuning fork. The first black knife comes from a phrase in the wall and stabs for Nefeli's kidney. She is already gone, pivoting, counterchop rising from hip to ear. Her axe hits a shadow and makes it remember it has a skeleton. Bone crunches. The assassin staggers as if insulted. He gives it the rest of the insult with an elbow to the temple and a heel to the knee. The knife falls, skitters, tries to keep being a noun without a verb. Fails. He steps on it. The floor feathers with frost that is not cold. Alive, he asks, because interrogation is value. The assassin spits something that is not blood and is not contempt. It is an old oath decanted into air. The luminary must die, she says, and lunges for her own blade without using her hands. He moves the blade with his mind into a crack, a simple denial. She looks at him with feral admiration, because she thought she had rehearsed all the ways to fail and found a new one today. Then she pulls another knife from a place the body should not be able to store knives and goes to work. They do not kill her. They unmake opportunities. They break fingers and leave tendons taught a new lesson about humility. He ties her with breath and algorithm, a rope made of not now that holds as long as his will stays near. Nefeli looks disappointed. She enjoys crisp answers. He nods toward a side chamber where the perfumers lay the assassin down like a patient and begin to coax out names with smells that open archives. Two more try clever geometry. They fail because he is a master of geometry and the room belongs to him by the end of the second minute. Then the hum goes quiet. The air stops convincing itself it is night. They are alone with statues that pretend not to see. He kneels. There is a slab in the floor, insignia chiseled to transparency by fingers who loved uncovering too much. He presses his palm to the seam and listens. The wound in his side pulses. The seam answers with a name. A place where death runs like a river and lightning eats stone as snack. Faramazula. He stands, and the light in the chamber exits like a person leaving a room they were not invited to. Nefeli looks at him with the look soldiers give commanders when a plan arrives. Bad place, she asks. Absolute place, he says. The Blade's law was born there. It will be stewarded by a being who remembers every death this world didn't get to have. If we step wrong, we make it honest. Meaning we die, she says, grinning, because her body likes the words more than her mind approves. Meaning the world tips, he says. Your joy is useful. Keep it behind your teeth until I say throw. They extract 3 names and a map that isn't. A sequence of held breaths and quiet steps under Lendel's feet, where stairs cut toward a forgotten angle. Gideon's projection arrives like a draft with better diction. You shouldn't be here, he says, unable to hide the joy of being right in the wrong place. It's a temple to a mistake. Then it is honest about what it is, the Emperor says. We go. Before you go, Gideon presses. Know this. If you fight Malekith, the Black Blade, he will be angry you exist. He guards death for a queen who made an argument out of love. He will cut your idea as if he is trimming hedges. He will not feel sinful. He will feel neat. We will kill him if we must, Nefeli says simply. Gideon looks at her like a teacher, looks at a child who understood the wrong part of a lesson and loved it. You cannot kill guardians of first law, he says. You can displace them, or convince them that your target is not violation, but correction. Open a path, the Emperor says, not to Malekith, to a bridge. I will choose where the duel is fought. He leaves Night's sacred ground with the taste of dust that used to be adjectives on his tongue. The wound behaves under strict supervision. He feels as he moves, the Erdtree's light pausing, curious finally, not merely rejecting. Good. Curiosity is the first moment of surrender in a god that thinks it knows everything. They cross Lendel above the living. Women beating rugs, men sharpening, boys daring each other to touch a fence that hums softly, and then pretending the hum came from their own bravery. He notices all of it and files it. This is why he is here, not for the tree, for the people who live under it, pretending it is theirs. A bell tolls. It isn't a city bell. It is the sound the world makes when someone important decides to be selfish in a new way. He looks up. On the outer wall, godskins have returned, this time with a prelate, a tall, funereal figure in folds of skin, stitched into a shape that implies choir. The black flame it raises carries a nuance he did not taste earlier. This fire is not hungry, it is disciplined. It will not lick buildings. It will unwrite the permissions necessary for a bridge to bear weight. He arrives in 3 breaths. The prelate speaks only once. Return the night, it says, meaning the edit that killed gods. He gives it instruction instead of insult. Disperse your choir, he says. Your fire will not overcome arithmetic today. It throws the flame. He folds the plaza into a gentle angle. The flame rides that angle like a novice bowman's arrow, hitting a crosswind, and fails to land where it intends. He catches the leftovers in a cup of air and snuffs them between 2 fingers made of intent. The prelate changes plan. It sings. The song turns the street into fat under a knife, the paving stones slickening, the mortar unbinding, the world becoming hospitable to black fire. He counters with percussion. Heel, knee, palm on stone, beating a new rhythm. The city under them remembers how to be a city, not a jellied thing. He keeps the beat with his heart, which is very tired of doing hard work, but does it anyway, because hearts are the last loyal soldiers. Black knives arrive in the prelate's shadow. They step out of him like regrets. They split, hiss, try his wound, try Nephili's enthusiasm. She answers with technique, not joy, and that pleases him. He crushes one assassin's blade between 2 palm vectors. The edge screams like a poem misread to break it, then stops existing as a tool. The assassin blinks with honest grief. He was married to that knife. He does not kill any of them. He removes options. He disarms 3. He denies footing to 2 by changing the coefficient of friction under their boots by thought. He gives the prelate a clean, unambiguous choice. Strike and lose dignity, retreat and lose face. It retreats because godskins love dignity more than faces. Control collateral. 2 cracked friezes, 1 fallen banner. 0 civilians. The perfumers wash ash out of the seams with a liquid that smells like bitter orange and absolution. The draconic tree sentinel nods once from the hinge and resumes being a door. Codex. Note. Godskin Black Flame optimizes on topology, rewriting surfaces into low-friction manifolds to assist spread. Counter with percussive reinforcement of load-bearing vectors, reasserting city geometry faster than the hymn can unbind it. The victory buys time and something better than time, narrative. Men see a way to win that doesn't scorch their children. That kind of seeing spreads in a city faster than oil. They return to the round table to report, because even free agents need to keep bookkeepers fed. Gideon listens with his head tilted like he can pour the story through his ear into the archive. Enya rocks, fingers whispering, the fingers tapping with less fear now that victory smells familiar again. Corin stands near the lamps and watches the Emperor's wound with a worried lover's eye. Love of law becomes concern for those who bend it without permission. The Emperor finishes speaking and lifts his hand. The lines on his palm are darker. The wound is narrow, black, shy of the thickness of a little finger and twice as long. A dash cut into a sentence nobody wanted to end. He does not hide it. We proved a method, Gideon says softly, pride disguised as neutrality. We held structure without larding it with new gods. We disciplined flame with beat and number. We prevented a minor collapse from becoming a story a week long. And we were cut, Nephili says. Your knife lovers are clever. They cost you for every kindness. Not kindness, he says. Preference. I prefer cities to survive without becoming stained with their own solutions. Mercy versus survival, Gideon says, picking at the thread like a patient tailor. We can dress our politics in fine words. Underneath, the cut says this: if you choose mercy, you pay a premium. We are not a rich people. You become rich by choosing mercy early, he says. Then survival stops costing so much. Steelman then, Gideon says, because he is the kind of man who would argue against himself when it serves the argument. Order claims, doctrine keeps normal people safe by being brutal to those who would break it. It argues, freedom lets bad actors test laws faster than law can learn. It cites the knight and the serpent court and the blood cult. It says, to love doctrine is to love the weak. Freedom answers, the Emperor says, carrying the weight of nations in a tone that refuses to turn it into melodrama. That doctrine without appeal becomes predation with a hymn. It says that allowing choice means allowing error, but it insists that human error is preferable to divine certainty. It accepts costs, and then it asks, what cost structure leaves us stronger next season? Both positions clean, Gideon says, pleased. Both bloody in application. I'm here to choose the blood that builds, he says. A tremor goes through the round table, as if someone dropped an iron ingot on the deck above. Ennia's head jerks. The will speaks, she whispers. It says, playtime ends. It says, correction incoming. It says, audience. The air smells of linen that has been pressed too often. The light smooths every wrinkle. For a heartbeat, a faint, exultant music threads the room. The song of a thing pleased with itself. He stands very still to avoid being measured when he is moving. He will choose his stance. The sensation passes. The fingers relax. Gideon exhales a laugh like a man who has sand in his throat. Supreme authority is awake, he says, which means your timeline tightens. Either we take knives off the board before the will takes you off the table, or we watch you become a case study. I prefer the former, the Emperor says. We leave now. Escort, the sentinel asks from the threshold where he has stood ignoring politics with a soldier's superpower. His armor smells like oil and holy sweat. No hinge, the Emperor says. I need a pivot. Nephili, Gideon says immediately, not because he commands her, but because he recognizes a match of problem and person. She nods. A pivot is a dance I can do. They depart again. A trio, and the city learning to exhale between attacks. They move upward this time, toward the high walks where nobles take air and assassins take rich people's time. The wound burns with a new interest when they cross a colonnade carved with sigils that make promises to the dead. He stops. He turns. He finds the sigil that is not like the others and touches it. His finger comes away with a sound like spider silk snapping. A doorway opens not as a rectangle but as a regret. The regret leads to a parapet that does not belong to the city. It belongs to somewhere in the storm where time is not convinced it should be one thing after another. Farum Azula is there in the distance like a wound in a map. The bridge is not built. It shouldn't be walkable. It is walkable because he decides it is. He decides slowly, paying attention to cost. Every step down, that non-bridge is expensive. An expense keeps the world honest. Nephili follows with her teeth showing because fear and exhilaration share a mask. The perfumer behind them has already started reciting her life to herself in case she needs to hand it to someone else quickly. They step into wind that has forgotten the ground. Farum Azula rotates on a logic of gravity that chose a style over a rule. Ruins hang with serious intent. Dragons sleep open-eyed. Lightning makes statements without waiting for counter-argument. The rune of death hums here like a bass note under a hymn. The Emperor feels his wound get excited like a dog smelling the door open. He does not go to Malekith. That duel will write him too deeply into this world too early. He chooses an outer precinct where the Guardians are statues that forgot how to stop fighting. He instructs Nephili with a flick of chin. Hold back, map by reading the air, not the floor. She nods, eyes wide. He advances, every step a polite request to the physics here, the world granting an exception because he is very good at saying please with math. Blade to blade with a guardian, he keeps it brief. The statue is not alive. Its law says, remember an opponent and repeat until broken. He breaks the loop gently, clipping the memory with a cut that removes the last 4 seconds from its recursion. It slows, confused, and he takes the blade and hands it asleep instead. Night crouches in a corner that used to be a prayer. The hum intensifies. The assassin who cut him steps out of the opposite wall and doesn't smile, because night does not endorse joy except at funerals. They circle. Lightning marks their cadence. You came to the root of the wound, she says. Accept correction and end. I came to understand the invoice, he says. Who do you report to? The idea of the world before thieves, she says, and attacks. They dance in a space where cuts can travel back a heartbeat to see if they preferred a different angle. That should favor her. Night is her sponsor. It does not, because the Emperor understands preference better than gods do. He holds his vectors unromantically tight. He takes a second scratch on his ribs and denies it the pleasure of widening. He traps her elbow and rewrites her shoulder just enough to take power out of her next 8 motions. She compensates. He respects the compensation. He takes the blade with 2 fingers and does not cut her, because killing is less educational than letting a competent enemy report something true. She vanishes into the seam of the rotating ruin, promising by posture to be more interesting the next time. He lets her go because he has measured the risk. Killing a fast-thinking agent now gives him a slower, larger enemy later. He prefers the clever ones alive until they teach him all they can. He retrieves a fragment of black knife from a crack where lordships accumulate. He holds it up and tastes its signature. It sings of a time when gods bled and queens compromised with the wolves. He wraps it in a thought and puts it away. That fragment is a promise. He can build a countermeasure that is not only stronger, but more elegant. They return to Leyndell by the same knot bridge, each step paying down a debt he can measure. At the threshold, the Erdtree's hum rises, not in refusal, in interest. He feels watched. He allows it. To quarantine, one must understand. To understand, one must be seen without agreeing to be owned. They walk into a new kind of alarm. No bells, no fire, no screaming. The city is quiet in a wrong way, the hush of people who have seen something that gave them the right to keep their mouths shut. Gideon's projection is already waiting, eyes very alive. News, he says without hello. A witness reports a miracle. A man in rags touched an omen child and the child's horn stopped aching. The mother cried and the crowd did not burn him. The will likes it. It says, keep him. The man is Goldmask. He writes equations with his finger in air and the air claps. Goldmask, Corin breathes, stepping into the projection's light like a moth who has found a better candle. He is a sign. He is a proof. He shows the Golden Order's axioms remain truthful if carried to their completion. Completion is a dangerous word, the Emperor says. He remembers people who loved completeness so much, they cut 1 billion edges off the world to leave a smooth sphere that rolled over everyone. We will speak with him. You will like him, Gideon says with a tight smile. He will like you less. He loves law without mercy because mercy is a form of noise. He will offer you partnership. He will demand you stop editing. Then he will meet resistance, he says, from me and from reality. He goes to find Goldmask on a balcony that watches the city without acknowledging that it belongs to it. A quiet man stands very straight, covered in dirt that looks like prayer. He points at the Erdtree with 2 fingers, making small adjustments in the air like a conductor tuning a rehearsal. Corin watches him with glowing eyes because he sees a saint with algebra. You are the one who fences, Goldmask says without turning, his voice gentle and firm like a well-placed lintel. You are noise. You are also proof that the Order tolerates noise for the sake of temporary life. This is acceptable in contingencies. It is not optimal. Optimality requires harmony. Harmony for whom? The Emperor asks. For law, Goldmask says, as if that answers everything. He turns finally, and the face behind the mask is not handsome or ugly. It is precise. The law is the beneficiary of our compliance. People live best when they live correctly. People live best when they own their living, the Emperor says. Law that serves people serves itself better in time. Harmony that feeds law at the expense of the living grows brittle. Brittle things shatter cleanly, Goldmask says, not unkind. This is a virtue. Messy things rot. They stand there and let the city be the mortar between their sentences. Corin breathes like a prayer finally finds vowels. Nephili shifts her weight like she would to keep a stag from bolting. I will not let the Order write itself across the stars as if no one else sings, the Emperor says. I will not let it own the definition of correct. Goldmask raises his hand and draws a line that is also a question. Will you break it? I will prune it, he says, to let it live with others. Goldmask lowers his hand. Then you will be judged, he says without threat, by a being you cannot persuade. Then I will withstand, the Emperor says. Night comes while they speak in the dumbfounding way it does here. The light remembers it has a second job. The city breathes out. Somewhere, a dragon decides it is less humiliated than hungry and leaves. Somewhere, a godskin measures a new song and discards it as derivative. Somewhere, a woman with a candle thanks a man who returned it to her. He can feel each small vector shift the sum in a better direction. He sleeps sitting for 40 minutes in a room that used to be a study. The wound hums but does not widen. He dreams deliberately of a perfect circle and then erases a point on its skin and lets the circle absorb the subtraction without becoming a drama. He stands. His joints creak in the way a fortress creaks. Notification, not failure. At dawn, he gathers Gideon, Nephili, the Sentinel, Enya, Corin, and the Perfumer Chief. He lays out his day. Close 3 more nodes. Force a parley with the knives by offering them something they cannot resist. Truth about their patron they haven't heard yet. Prepare an avenue for retreat through a tunnel of air only he can hold open. Build a tool to misdirect Destined Death's invoice when next it tries to bill him. Gideon nods. He has names. He hands them over. Enian lists the will's tolerances and thresholds like a safety manual. Corin wrings his hands and then steadies them on his book. Nephili grins and doesn't apologize. He leaves the room and the city opens in front of him, like a map he didn't draw, but has decided to respect until he does. The first node accepts its fence. The wardens nod, less afraid. The second fights. He beats it with percussion and grace. The third is already defended, by people, not doctrine. A circle of women with brooms and poles and knives that were honest until this morning. He stops. He watches. He decides they can own this victory. He shows them how to set the fence with a rope and scent and prayer repurposed as civic engineering. He steps back. He's not a god. His hand need not be seen on every solution. By midday, the knives bite again. This time, they do not come in singles. They come as a harmony that has learned dissonance. 3 assassins braid their angles to deny him clean counters. They speak not to him but to each other with clicks the ear can't hold on to. The fight is harder. He earns a new scratch shallow enough to not deserve pride, deep enough to irritate. Nephili earns a cut on her forearm and laughs because it didn't take her hand. They break the braid by introducing a 4th angle that belongs to nobody. He steps through 3 vectors and makes gravity remember one of their mothers. The assassins land badly and decide retreat is style. He lets them take it. The invoice hums across his ribs and he writes a note on it. Pending. Evening draws down. He returns to the round table with numbers that resolve into a check. Fewer incursions, more confident wardens, godskins dispersing to write fewer hymns. Gideon does not praise, he calibrates. Enia does not bless, she warns. The fingers drum, the will keeps time. He looks at his hands. The letters are darker again. He feels stronger and more tired, the paradox of command. He looks at the city and sees a day added to its life. He looks at the sky and sees a problem bigger than saving days. He needs to plant a knife in a law. The night before the duel, he stands on the divine bridge where he fell and did not break anything he wanted to keep. The draconic tree sentinel steps up beside him without asking if he may. What do you need? The knight asks. From men who cannot stand on wind. Hold, the emperor says, so that when I fall on a day I didn't plan to, there is still a hinge that turns and a city that remembers how to pivot. The sentinel grunts. Hinges do not seek glory, he says. They outlive it. Good, the emperor says. Glory is a poor ration. Nephili appears on his other side, smelling faintly of soap and iron. Tomorrow, she asks. Tomorrow we cut a concept, he says. I will bring the sharp axe, she says, cheerful as a sin forgiven. He watches the Erdtree glow like a god that thinks its day will be without end and feels no hatred for it. He prepares to teach it the courtesy of limits. He feels the wound hum a warning and accepts it like a weather report. He knows the name of the thing he will face. He knows the law it holds. He knows the price of keeping cities from being hymns written over people. He has always known. He does not pray. He plans. The war room smells like oil and parchment. He stands over a plan laid on nothing, drawing lines with 2 fingers and letting the lines be rules. Gideon Ofnir watches, pleased by the geometry even as he bristles at being led. Enia listens to the fingers with her head cocked, as if the roots are whispering through her bones. Nephili Lu leans her great axe against her shoulder and bounces on her heels. Patience is armor that doesn't fit her well. Malekith protects a law, the emperor says. He is not a beast first. He is a function with a sword. He defends the rune of death not to kill, but to keep killing honest. If we attack him as if he is muscle, we lose words we need to say later. Gideon nods without taking his eyes off the lines. Standard counters? Useless, the emperor says. Heat makes no argument against a cancellation rune. Armor angers symbols. It will not stop one. Warp pressure is appetite. Destined death starves appetite and calls that mercy. He will wound me in ways that do not bleed right. He will make my self-remembering leak. Ennia's fingers twitch against the fingers. The will abhors the night, she says, but it respects what Malekith is. He was a leash made into scripture. We need counters that change invoices, the Emperor says. He sets a shard on the table that isn't a table. It drinks the light around it without casting a shadow. From the knife I took, it carries the rune's scent, will reflect its accounting into a sink. A sink? Gideon asks, intrigued. A dead thing that can be made to eat more death without complaining, the Emperor says. A dragon skeleton will do. Or a shrine that loves endings. Nephili grins. I know a dragon that owes us respect. Not Gransax, Gideon snaps. We require the capital to still be here tomorrow. Then we use the bones that live in the storm, the Emperor says. Farum Azula. He draws the route in silence. The space between cities that is also a rumor. Perfumer Chief traces scent marks where air will remember to behave. The draconic tree sentinel stands in the doorway and looks hungry to hinge a door nobody can see. Briefing, the Emperor says sharp. Objective, force Malekith into parley by demonstrating that I can take a piece of his invoice off the board. Rules, I take the blade. You do not die. Nephili holds perimeter and denies angles. Perfumer Cadre lays taste map for a retreat corridor. Gideon, keep your eyes on our exit. If the will sends a correction, I need 30 breaths warning. Enya, listen. If the fingers start to hum, I need to know if it's song or alarm. Song and alarm sound the same at this volume, Enya says, almost laughing. He looks at Nephili. If I say drop, you drop. If I say go, you go. If I say hold, you make a hinge out of breath. My favorite craft, she says. They take the knot bridge when the city blinks. It is less a span and more a sequence of permissions he writes with his feet. Air thickens and thins under his weight in deliberate rhythm. Farum Azula turns in the distance like a slow blade. Lightning tosses arguments between clouds. Dragon bones hold court on pillars that have not decided whether falling would be vulgar. The shard in his hand hums against his palm, eager as a hound that has scented the quarry that taught it to hunt. He grinds the urge down to discipline. No flourish, he says. No first strike. We ask. If he refuses, we demonstrate. Wind peels tears off the eyes of men who do not cry. The perfumer binds a thin ribbon around a broken column, and it flutters in a pattern that says north if you know the alphabet of storms. Nephili walks half a step behind his left shoulder with her weight forward, a dance pose that makes enemies misjudge distance. They enter a precinct that is half temple, half cliff. Statues of beasts kneel under weight only they respect. A cleric in rags reads a book to no one, his lips black with the pulp of a plant that does not forgive. He smells like bones ground into paste to feed a god. He looks up. In his eyes the world is already ended, and this is the epilogue. Gurunk, Nephili whispers. The cleric blinks. That name stirs something wounded and old. Leave, he says, voice like stone dragged over teeth. This is a place where law is kept sharp. Your breath dulls it. We came to talk to the hand that holds the blade, the Emperor says, calm. I do not break laws that keep people from becoming gods at breakfast. I break laws that try to own my children. Malekith, show your face. The cleric moves in a way that is not a decision. The book falls and remembers it was a blade when it was young. Black light crawls up the spine and turns into an edge. The rags melt off a body that is muscle made into vow. Gold crawls across the blade, a light with memory, and makes the wound on the Emperor's ribs throb like a tooth that has learned a word. "Custodian," Malekith says, and the word is not an insult. "Thief of death's rest. Keeper of death's right," the Emperor replies. "Guardian, do we talk?" "We talk with edges," Malekith says. "Your existence argues that life may simply refuse to conclude. I exist to grade that paper." He doesn't bow. He doesn't raise his chin. He steps into an angle where his shoulders can deliver power and his chest can carry subtraction without collapsing. Nephili shifts to cover his right blind. Perfume unfurls behind them like a drawn map. Malekith moves first. He's fast the way a door is fast when it slams in a wind you didn't notice. The black blade cuts a diagonal across space, and the diagonal is a sentence that says end. The Emperor meets it with a palm vector and redirects half a breadth of the cut into a pillar. The pillar does not break. It ceases to remember. It was load-bearing and slumps, like a man sitting down too quickly. The edge kisses his forearm. Heat does not burst. Blood does not spray. The wound opens like a subtraction sign written on skin that didn't ask to host a math problem. He feels a piece of himself being invoiced. He pays attention. Malekith follows with a thrust that would puncture policy. The Emperor turns hip and ribs and lets the thrust glide past into his aura, where it meets layers of no arranged in spirals. The no holds, but less than it should. The law under the rune drags at his anchor. He counters with economy. He cuts Malekith's wrist at an angle that makes tendons doubt themselves. Then he steps inside and taps the sternum, testing the armor there. The tap rings like a bell that has heard worse. "Talk then," Malekith says. "You eulogize cities rather than bury them. Why do you need a world that does not end?" "Because a species becomes wise by living long enough to pay for its mistakes in reforms, not funerals," the Emperor says, cutting left to right, the blade that weighs the same in every world. "Because the kind of ending you keep honest can be weaponized by gods who like tidy books. Because my enemies beyond your sky would eat your law and wear its skin." Malekith circles. The wind sings through the crack in his armor where a prayer failed to latch. "I guard an end that cannot be stolen again," he says. "Your kind stole it once. Your presence is theft on legs." The Emperor shifts his stance. He does not yield ground. "Your lady removed death to spare the one she loved," he says. "Understandable, stupid. Creating an accounting hole to protect a heart let monsters balance their ledgers with lives." Malekith's answer is a flurry. The black blade is a pen that writes faster than eyes read. Each stroke drains. The Emperor trades. He catches 3 with palm and wrist and forearm. He eats 2 with ribs and lets one take a strip of light off his shoulder that won't regrow until it stops wanting to be a strip. His vision narrows at the edges. The sound of lightning becomes a low song. He speaks through the cuts. "I will not make your mistake," he says. "I will keep death honest, and I will keep law from colonizing the future. You can help me, or you can try to grade me into silence. Then take the exam," Malekith says, and the temple gives way. He sheds cleric and becomes the blade in full. Gold and black, howl and vow. He leaps, faster than memory. Arcs of destined death trail his swings. Crescent waves that write endings into air and make the rock they touch crack along lines no mason planned. The Emperor opens his misdirection. The shard sings in his hand. He catches a crescent with 2 fingers and a thought and redirects its invoice, pushing it into a ribbed column of fossilized beast. The column blackens from inside, a candle lit in stone. It drinks. That buys 3 breaths. Malekith feels the theft of his theft. He snarls. He becomes surprise made into discipline. He splits the next arc into 2, sending one high to break the path of the retreat corridor, the other low to make Nephili move. She drops without him telling her. The low crescent soars through the air where her throat was a blink ago, and shaves a lock of her hair to ash. Her laughter is honest and wrong. He cannot hold all the invoices. One arc touches his chest. It writes a short word across his heart. He feels an emptiness open, not in his body, but in the place his anchor ties to the idea of his body. He will not regenerate past that word, not now, not without a louder word. He changes plan. He stops trying to be clever. He goes blunt and absolute. He steps inside the next cut. Suicide if you respect physics, and understands that Malekith is a creature who respects stories more than physics. He makes a new story up close. He headbutts the Guardian under the jaw. He steps on the ankle. He pulls shoulder and elbow and wrist into a line that denies the next swing the etiquette it craves. He stamps once and the stone under them remembers being a flaw. They lock. Malekith speaks soft for a thing that howls. Serve, he says. Take this blade to your stars. Return death to immortals. Prune tyrants with honesty. End your demons. Do not ask gods for permission. Be my regent in a sky that thinks it is beyond audit. The words fall into a pocket in the Emperor's chest where hunger lives. He sees perpetuals who will not die. He sees warp entities that feed on long lives like they are vineyards. He sees a galaxy that would be cleaner with an end for monsters. He sees his own throne and imagines being its judge instead of its prisoner. It is the neat optimization of his flaw. He closes his hand around the shard until it cuts. He answers without heat. I will not outsource morality, he says. I do not take another god's sword to solve my god's problems. I make tools. I model costs. I teach men to be better than the easy ending. Malekith drives the blade through that refusal. The cut starts at breastbone and goes deeper than anatomy. Light leaves, heat leaves, assertion leaves. It is not pain. It is bookkeeping. The world demands a signature. He gives it nothing. He holds the hole open as a whole and refuses to let it own more of the sentence than it took. That refusal costs him a color. His vision loses a blue that he will not name. Nephili hits Malekith hard enough to shame a legend. Her axe lands across the blade arm, low on the triceps. It doesn't cut. Cutting a law is a joke. It interrupts the swing. It changes cadence. It saves a man. She takes a riposte across her ribs that does not bleed, but will age her. She keeps her smile under discipline. Told you I could pivot, she says through teeth, and breathes like a forge. He spends the breath she bought. He pushes the shard song into the death wave building in Malekith's next slash. He pushes it into the dead dragon rib he has been herding them toward for the last 20 beats. The rib hums. It drinks. It cracks, then glows black, then collapses into crumbs that are lighter than ash and heavier than regret. The wave drains with it. Malekith snarls and feels for the first time in this fight denial delivered to him, not by a god, but by a man. The sky answers with gold. Light jolts through the ruin like a warning shot meant for seas. The Erdtree throws a sheet of rain made of rules across the arena, each drop a clause, each clause a boundary. It does not save anyone. It says, this duel has reached the threshold of acceptable edits. Further edits will be graded by higher jurisdiction. The fingers in Leyndell convulse on Ennia's lap. Gideon says a word that tastes like iron and respect. Judgment. The intervention is a line drawn in air. It is not a hand that catches anyone. He reads it. He makes a soldier's choice. Disengage, he says. I have seen enough. Malekith's blade stops humming. He lowers it without surrender. You will be weighed, he says, at the heart. If you pass, I will not chase you. If you fail, I will find your bed. I don't sleep much, the Emperor says, and the humor is dry as chalk. They step back through wind and not geometry under a rain of law. The misdirection corridor holds long enough. The perfumer's marks flutter. Nephi bleeds light in a thin line where the cut wrote a promise. The Emperor covers her with the part of his aura that still behaves. He pays for that cover with heat he will not have later. White says. They arrive on Lanedale's parapet. The city's breath catches at the sight. This is not victory. It is survival with information. Gideon's projection blinks into presence, lips pressed, eyes counting cracks. Enya holds her arms like the fingers are a child she cannot comfort. The draconic tree sentinel watches the way men watch whetstones when the blade looks duller after use. He sits because the wound demands that geometry again. Hands shake once. He clamps down. The black line across his chest hums with a voice he cannot drown. The lines on his palms are darker, like letters burned into wood by a patient tyrant. Perfumer hands work. They lay resin that tastes like winter citrus and old iron across the wound. It does nothing to close the hole. It teaches the edges to stop licking at his anchor. That's enough. Report, Gideon says, soft like a priest in a sick room. Malekith guards the law, the Emperor says. He cannot be bought. He can be distracted. He cannot be killed without breaking something larger than his ribs. He offered me a sword to take to my stars. I declined. If you had accepted, Gideon says, curious as a child at a window, not accusing. I would have cleaned my galaxy, the Emperor says, and lost it. Nephi breathes out and then in. I hit a legend, she says. I'm keeping that. You paid for it, he says. You will feel winter under your scar on hot days. She bares her teeth. I will call that winter by its name and then drink. Enya wipes her eyes with fingers that were not meant for such work. The will sends a writ, she says, voice shaking with something that is not fear. It says, reach the throne. It says, audience. It says, you will not be allowed to be a local weather system any longer. You will become a climate or leave. Gideon straightens, relief and dread mixing. Supreme authority invites, he says. The Erdtree has noticed you past curiosity. It has decided to use you or cut you away. The Emperor looks down at his hands. He can feel the argument spreading under his skin, as veins of gold that are not his. He can stop them for now, like a dam holds a river, because the river does not yet remember it was a mountain. He is tired in an honest way, the way a man is tired after building something heavy and only half done. Pilgrimage, he says. Escort of elite. Chapel stops. Medici checks. I will be spoken to without ears. Gideon nods once and then again, catching up with being outmaneuvered. I will prepare names you should know and names you should pretend to forget, he says. You will be offered 3 doors. I will have opinions about all of them. Save them, the Emperor says. This judgment is not your debate. It is mine. Nephi wipes her ribs with a rag that will never be clean again. She looks at the Erdtree as if it were a stag that has finally agreed to come to water. We'll walk at your back, she says. We'll tell the story after regardless. He stands. The wound hums. The city steadies itself by listening to boots on stone. He looks at the Erdtree and does not hate it. He respects a thing that shows itself. He will not bow to it. He will not burn it yet. He will go to its heart and be weighed and come out with teeth. They move at first light, when the pollen is low, and the city sleeps with one eye open. The escort is small by design. Nephi Lu with her Stormjoy clipped to duty. The perfumer chief with 3 vials that taste like winter and 1 that tastes like thunder. Brother Corin, because doctrine insists on watching what it fears. The draconic tree sentinel, stripped of horse and halberd, a hinge and nothing more. Gideon's projection ghosts alongside as a ribbon of knowing that does not sweat. Their first halt, is a chapel that smells of resin and rope. Medicae hands swab the wound that is not a wound, laying amber paste in a line that does not close anything but convinces edges to stop questioning. The Emperor watches them work without flinching. He counts breaths. He counts the little gold letters on his palms that have darkened overnight. Coin folds his book like a man who wishes it were a shield. The will invites, he murmurs, half prayer, half argument. You should go as a penitent, not as a rival. Penitents arrive bent, the Emperor says, not unkindly. Rivals arrive with noise. I'm neither. I'm a neighbor with a fence. Fences cut communities, Corin says. Doctrine is a village without walls. Doctrine is a wall people pretend is a song, Nephili says dryly, rolling her shoulder. Villages still need gates. The perfumer taps a vial and watches the viscous line settle. Pain level. Honest, the Emperor says. He closes his hand into a fist, and the letters bite. Cost level. Rising. Gideon's voice slips out of the air like a knife sliding out of cloth. The fingers say, come. The will says, obey. The difference matters if you care about verbs. I care, the Emperor says, and moves. They take upper ways where the city's breath is cleaner. Lendel's stone learns their steps. The Erdtree's glow thickens, not brighter, just more. Every corner holds a little more gold than it did a street ago. The ground is a measure. They are beating a path through it. At the second halt, a Medicae cloister tucked under a colonnade. The perfumers rig a sling for Nephili's ribs. She tolerates it the way warriors tolerate help, with visible impatience and secret gratitude. The draconic tree sentinel watches doors. He doesn't fidget. He never has. Gideon manifests in a bowl of water. Final counsel before the invitation becomes a command, he says, eyes too sharp. When you are weighed, you will be offered neat solutions. Be alert for anything that requires only your consent to fix a world. Gods love signatures. Dogma loves signatures more than gods do, Corin says, bristling. Then catching himself. Forgive me. I will forgive you if you find a rule you love less than you love your people, the Emperor replies. They set out again. A slow procession that refuses to look like a parade. The Erdtree swells in their vision like a verdict. Lendel's terraces ascend toward the thorny gate that denies everyone but invitation and flame. The thorns are asleep. Today they stir. They rustle like a book's pages turning. They part with reluctance and ceremony. Halfway there, the world chooses to argue. The cobbles under their feet polish themselves without hands. Shadows tighten into law. The air kneels to a thought that is not theirs. On the far side of an arch, a man steps out of a brightness like a purge. He is tall. He is armored in aurum that is not auramite. His sigil is a tree threaded through a sun and a throne. His face is the Emperor's face, tightened by an engineer who thinks he can improve on intent. Nephili's axe lifts without touching air. The draconic tree sentinel takes a half step in front of her without asking permission. The perfumer opens a vial and a smell of coal candlelight spills out. The double studies them like a resource. His voice is a better version of their leader's voice. It better means easier to archive. Emperor, he says. Optimized. Name, the Emperor says. The word is a drill bit. Imperial Regent of the Golden Mandate, the copy says, anointed by logic. I am you without waste. I accept constraint where it improves compliance. I reject mercy that lengthens the path to order. Mirror foe, Gideon breathes, almost admiring. Radagon's math found a face. The Emperor steps forward until his aura bites his twins. Gold on gold. What do you want? To help you stop pretending to be smaller than your design, the Regent says. Conquer quickly, prune cleanly, replace consent with compliance. The people will love the peace when they learn to call it their idea. Whose idea is it? The Emperor asks. The will's, the regent says, as if it were a compliment. The clash is short and precise because both men value time. The regent moves like a plan. The Emperor moves like a man who knows when plans must flex. The blades are the same length, but not the same history. The first exchange is a demonstration. 3 strikes, a parry, a shoulder check. The second is a test, an angle change, a foot trap, a hand on throat long enough to imagine a kill. The third exchange is the real one. Will against mandate. The regent's aura is stiffer than law. It does not like to bend. He tries to overwrite the wound with a compliance clause. The wound laughs because it loves not obeying. The Emperor slides out of a perfect counter and introduces turbulence. He gives ground exactly where the regent expects authority and reclaims it where the regent expects ritual. The regent frowns for the first time. His geometry hates surprise. A rain of gold interrupts, vertical and absolute. Drops hang in the air like sentences ending themselves. Each drop is a clause. Not here, not now, not this. The regent looks up, chastised in the way of lieutenants when the general walks in. He bows because he enjoys it. He fades into a correction fold like a man stepping back into a page. Message received, Gideon says faintly. Reach the throne. They pass through parted thorns. Sound dies. The Erdtree's inside is not a place. It is a continuity of light wrapped in wood. The floor is root and law. The walls are sap and decree. The air tastes like clean paperwork. They walk through gold like swimmers in syrup. Pageantry attends. Knights of Lendel stand to attention, armor worked with constellations of runes. Crucible retainers flare old organs out of their backs and then fold them tidily away, an aesthetic of power restrained. Perfumed heralds in white carry horns shaped like fingers and do not blow. The presence is its own trumpet. Pale envoys with smileless faces hold harps and do not pluck. Silence completes the chord. A ring of veiled figures in ash-white linen sit motionless, and their stillness is a null that eats resonance. The Emperor feels his warped tenor dampen, not cancelled, contained. He nods. He likes systems that declare themselves. They reach a hall that is too tall to be humble and too quiet to be honest. At its far end, a figure sits on a throne that is not a chair, but the idea of a chair written in stars. Marika and Radagon, and the thing behind both, are present as absence. Radiance drapes like tapestry. The floor trembles the way a deer trembles when it sees a lion and cannot decide if running is disrespect. Aeneas is there, small, hands on fingers that tap like rain on bone. She looks terrified, happy, broken, and satisfied. Gideon's projection evaporates at the threshold as if modesty was suddenly fashionable. The draconic tree sentinel bows because hinges know how to kneel when doors open. Nephili stands square and lets holy light draw accurate shadows on her face. The Emperor stops at the correct distance to be insolent and respectful at once. Nothing speaks. The speaking happens anyway. It enters his head like axioms falling down a well. It is not voice. It is weighted clarity, a choice arrayed like the inside of a machine. A pressure extends a hand that is not a hand. It touches his wound, not to heal it, but to inventory it. It runs gold across his palms and says, label. It outlines his aura and says, compliance. It shows him Lendel as a petri dish and says, optimization. It offers him love if love is the consistent application of rules. He does not hate it. He answers with pictures and numbers. He shows it cities that learned to breathe after a tyrant died. He shows it war that ate a generation and made a doctrine so brittle it cracked at a sneeze. He shows it children who survived because a soldier held a hinge. He shows it the warp, not as hunger, but as music with teeth. And he says, "Your light will draw this like sugar draws ants." The throne hums a chord that means growth with limits. He replies, "Growth with consent." It replies, "Consent is noise." He replies, "Noise is how truth learns which parts survive." The veiled gnolls tighten their ring. His light dims. Empires in his blood resent being asked to whisper. He lets them. He is not here to flex. He is here to be weighed. Images stack. Past lords crushed cities to make order. Past rebels burned order to make freedom. The will has loved both at different times and called both names for itself. It shows him a law that stretches across stars like a net and demands the shape of every fish. He shows it nets torn by storms that teach better knots. On the dais, a thing shaped like a fish and a sword uncoils. The Elden beast, the will's envoy, almost gracious. It glides without moving. Its eyes are the correct number for a constellation. It carries in its spine a book that has no pages, because all its pages are current. He feels in its regard a test written before he existed. He refuses to be insulted by that. Old rubrics grade new arguments poorly. He will adjust the rubric by existing inside it. The quiet becomes a language. There is a table, and on it lie 3 doors as if they were cards. The first door is a circle that returns. Return to elsewhere. It shows him a webway throat and a choir-grown horse. It shows him his throne and the mortals who hate it for good reasons and still need it. It promises a memory tax. If he leaves now, his time here will fade, not as punishment, but as policy. His fences will unravel like string pulled by a cat. Mercy unremembered is mercy not learned. The second door is a road that diverges into alleys. Free agent. No sanction. He keeps moving as he has, unclaimed and unwelcome. He will be hunted by knives and hugged by children and undermined by gold. His story will break into 10 songs sung off-key. Schism follows him like a stray dog. The third door is a straight line made of gold bars. Sanctioned servant. A bond that braids his light with the will's logic. He gains authority and errands. He loses a hand to sign with. He gets to cut law with law in exchange for naming the law the owner of the knife. He does not move. He watches himself want door 2. He watches himself imagine door 3. He watches door 1 open to a throne that is empty for a reason. He thinks of Nephili's grin, and the draconic tree sentinel's hinge, and the child with a candle who believed him when he said she would need it. He speaks out loud so his escort can hear what he has decided, and so the will knows he intends to account for his words to humans, not only to gods. "I will take your sanction and refuse your leash," he says calmly. "You will make a mandate. I will accept operating rules that protect your people from my appetite, and you will accept my clause. Mercy is the default, force is the exception, and doctrine cannot overrule a human who is doing the moral thing because the clause says so." The hall tightens as if a muscle had just been asked to lift a weight it didn't plan to. Enya makes a noise that is only half a sob. The fingers stop tapping for the length of a heart's pause. The will places a condition. It is not spoken, but it is very clear. It says, "When you pay, you will pay in sight. Your light will be visible when it acts against me. I will see you coming, and I will force you to be proud in public." "Agreed," he says, "if you promise to warn me when my fences become nets." The Elden beast ripples, a laugh or an earthquake. The gold on his palms rearranges into new letters. They do not spell a name, they spell rules. He reads them because reading is how men stay free under mandates. Power scaling, interlude. The 2. Under the mandate, my aura cannot exceed a specified radiance. inside Erdtree influence, without triggering a corrective hymn that drains me in proportion to disruption. Fencing nodes taxes me linearly to 3, exponentially beyond. I may not alter the logic of major runes by direct assertion. Attempts rebound as localized nulls that blind me for a count of 10. Invoking warp vector tools inside sanctified precincts creates mute zones where my own telepathy weakens, and allies cannot rely on me for reflex cover. My wound from destined death is pegged. It will not widen unless I violate the clause against erasing deaths already written. In exchange, the will recognizes my quarantine writ. Its agents cannot expand external enforcement without alerting me in advance. The hall relaxes around the new geometry. The veiled nulls adjust their chairs. Nights shift. Small metal sounds like punctuation. Nephili lets out a breath she had locked behind her teeth. The perfumer wipes her hands and pretends she has not been crying. Symbols burn on the Emperor's chest where the cut lives. Gold crawls up to meet black. They touch. They negotiate. The black does not yield. The gold does not rot. They draw a boundary as skillfully as two kings dividing a river. The will signs in its way. A rumor of a nod from a statue that never moves. Marika and Radagon remain stone and code, but the room learns that the decision is law. The Emperor's armor alters, not in color, in grammar. Auramite plates take a faint filigree of root lines, not as ownership, as treaty. His blade learns a new edge it will use exactly 4 times in his life because 4 is honest for this kind of power. A sigil appears over his heart, not the tree, not the aquila. A braided emblem where branch and wing cross and refuse to break. He sets his own terms out loud so the nulls hear and the knights memorize, and Nephili can hit him with them later if he drifts. Boundaries clause, he says. I will not command your soldiers in your temples. I will not alter your rights under roofs you sanctify. I will warn mortals before I fence their gods. I will show mercy unless it kills more than it saves. When I use force, I will leave an audit trail. When the audit blames the law, I will not burn cities to save my pride. Enia exhales and lets her forehead touch bone. Accepted, she whispers, as if repeating the will's weight. Sanctioned servant. Quarantine warden. Gideon does not appear, but his voice does, soft, half amazed. You negotiated a catechism. I negotiated a truce, the Emperor says. Catechisms pretend to be over. The draconic tree. Sentinel lowers to one knee because hinges respect new doors. Nephili laughs out loud, a wild sound in a holy place, and clamps it back down to something like a cough. You look different, she says. You look like a promise you intend to keep. Hold me to it, he says. A last sign arrives to end the audience. A shower of tiny leaves that never touch the ground. Each leaf is a clause. Each clause lands on his skin and reads him before it dissolves. There is no pain. There is recognition. He is now a visible exception. He will not enjoy being visible. They turn to go. The thorns part again with more willingness. The veiled nulls watch him as if measuring his noise. He inclines his head to them. One nods back, a professional acknowledging another. Outside, the city receives them like a lung that has been allowed to inhale after a long-held breath. Bells sound, not alarm, not triumph, something in between, something like books closing after a session. On the steps beneath the gate, Goldmar stands with Korhin at his shoulder. The Saint of Equations raises a hand and draws without looking, a line that matches the new filigree on the Emperor's armor. He nods once. Korhin looks confused, then awed, then troubled, then calm. The progression fits a man who loves rules and just watched rules be amended in front of him by consent. Judgment, Goldmask asks. Operating agreement, the Emperor answers. Goldmask inclines his head. Better than doctrine, he he says softly. Worse than truth. Acceptable. You found truth inside a world that punishes it, the Emperor says. You have my respect. Respect is a tool, Goldmask says. Let us build something that deserves it. They descend into a city altered not in shape, but in posture. Wardens admire Erdtrees straighten with new purpose. The fences hum with less friction. The perfumers set their curtains with better discipline. The sanguine drips halt before they congeal. The godskins measure and step away, calculating costs with less confidence. Dragons watch from far cloud and, for once, do not immediately look like problems. In a colonnade shadow, the mirror foe watches too, held at bay by a clause he hates and bound by a theatre he enjoys. He folds his hands behind his back and convinces the air that he was never here. He will return when men are tired. The Emperor pauses at a plaza where a woman sweeps glass again, because there is always glass somewhere. He bends and takes the broom for 3 strokes and hands it back. He lets people see him solve a thing too small for strategy. It costs him nothing he cannot afford. It buys him a language he will need tomorrow. He walks with Nephili at his shoulder and the draconic tree sentinel a pace behind, light falling on them like duty that has chosen a form. The wound hums at a new pitch, contained but not forgiven. The letters on his palm spell rules. He feels the city's attention move with him like a tide. He accepts it because this is what sanction buys, visibility and its taxes. Night sidles toward the edges of stone. He senses knives remembering him. He senses Malekith on his border, neutral and awake, a dog at a gate waiting for thieves. He senses the will considering whether it has just hired a weapon or adopted a problem. He senses Gideon grin when nobody can see him. Because plans like this make good books. They stop at the Divine Bridge because starts and ends like circles. The wind there tastes less like pollen, more like sky. The Erdtree's shadow lies neatly across the stones. The city murmurs down. Nephili leans on the parapet and looks at the world like it is a piece she might be allowed to carve. So, she says, sanctioned, servant, how does that sit? Like a harness with a knife tucked under it, he says. I can ride. I can cut the strap if I need to. Good, she says. I like seeing you honest. He watches the horizon. He feels another law far away, blood that likes itself too much. Coil. He files it under tomorrow. He feels the mirror foe adjust somewhere above, Radagon's neatness preparing a counter. He files it under soon. He feels the city's breathing smooth out into something that sounds like sleep and does not look like complacency. They stand there a while and let the world lay down around them, not in peace, but in order that grew with consent. When they move again, it is not with drama. They go to work. Tomorrow will ask for choices big and petty, and both will matter. The tree is watching. The knives are sharpening. The god is content enough to wait, and the people are ready to see whether mercy pays. In the thickening dark, a child from the morning 2 days ago walks past with her candle stub held like a scepter. She looks up at him and sees the new sigil and does not know what it means. She decides to like it. That, more than any clause, is a sign that the day will hold. The escort peels off to barracks and cloisters. The hinge returns to a gate and hinges. The perfumer sleeps with a vial under her pillow. Corin sits very still with a book open and does not read it. Gideon writes a page. He doesn't show anyone. Enya dreams in tapping. Goldmask points at the sky and draws a line that gives an angel pause. Inable Kaiser, the Emperor of Mankind, closes his eyes for 19 breaths and opens them on a world that has agreed to argue with him fairly. He accepts. He sharpens his intent. He measures his costs. And he listens to the wind in the throne's roots, answer back like a promise he intends to make expensive for anyone who breaks it. The day after sanction tastes like brass and promise. He wakes knowing the will sees his light when it moves against gold. He restrains it on principle and because the rule is paid for in breath. The wound hums, pegged where gold met black, and agreed to argue forever. Nephili watches him test his range and grins when he grimaces. The draconic tree sentinel cleans a halberd that is not with him because some habits laugh at orders. A bell that isn't a bell vibrates the city. It is not warning, not triumph, summons. The sewers respond first. Red smoke with a taste of copper fingers outward under grates. Sanguine nobles blister up from holes like ulcers finding mouths. The first knife writes an address. The Omen Ward. Someone believes the new warden is bound to show mercy and hopes to drown him in it. Lines, he says, and men find themselves standing in them because command is a rhythm they already know. Perfumer curtains hang like precise fog. Broom women who fenced a node yesterday bring poles and position like veterans. The hinge takes the bridge and becomes a door again. Gideon's voice appears in water and names 3 other breakpoints. Goldmask points at one that isn't named, and Corin goes pale because it is a chapel he loves. He goes to the Omen Ward in 3 controlled strides that flatten time. The sanguine rite is not subtle. Blood fingers weave in the air, trying to pin the space where Omen children sleep into a net they can pull. He tastes a will further down the drain. Ma, Lord of Blood, not in person, but in method, an ideology pouring itself uphill. He smells fear and shame. The dynasty loves those 2 spices most. He lowers aura to avoid triggering the hymn and steps into the web. Stop, he says, and his voice is a tool, not a threat. The dynasty priest in charge turns with the confidence of men who feed gods with other people's bodies. He wears the crown of dirty fingers and smiles like a boil. You bind yourself, the priest hisses. You ask to be weighed. Be weighed with them. He answers with a rule. Clause 1, mercy first, he says to himself and the city, and then enforces mercy with physics. He cuts the air where the net ties together. The cut isn't a blade. It is a subtraction of permission. The net collapses toward his hand, and he wraps it around his fist like rope, then hands it to the perfumer chief who pours a smell into it the dynasty cannot stand. It becomes a thing without taste, and priests without taste are lazy. The priest lunges with a blood flame knife. He meets wrist with wrist and reroutes the strike into flagstones. The knife writes a hole that isn't a hole. He reads it. It's a door for Mo's eye. He closes it by drawing a fence through it and stamping a clause onto the stone with his heel. Not here again. An Omen child wakes sobbing with relief he has never learned to show. Nephili sits on the floor beside him and grunts approval without touching, because her mercy reads better when it looks like respect. The priest resorts to theatre, blood boiling up out of his sleeves in a fountain. He holds it in a sphere around them and demands that it own the moment. The emperor ignores him because God's proxies hate to be ignored. He looks at the Omen children and says, "Stay with me." They do because his voice sounds like a hinge when doors swing. He tightens aura, controlled. The hymn does not trigger. The blood sphere squeezes and cannot find purchase. He scratches a line on the air with 2 fingers, and the blood remembers it is liquid and falls like weather. The priest gapes, less at the failure and more at the humiliation. He was promised awe. Go, the emperor tells him. Take your doctrine somewhere we are not having this conversation. The priest spits oil into the name of Moog and vanishes, leaving a smear of contempt on the idea of the room. The Omen children breathe. The wardens hold. The perfumer lets the net fall, and it lands as rope, not harm. He leaves it there. The city will decide what to do with it. He feels the second pressure before anyone can speak. God skins at the second gate again, and this time they're smart enough to try the hymn while his light is on other work. The hinge already holds. The gate shivers under a song that makes stone want to be fat. He runs. He arrives and gives orders without drama. "Percus," he says. Men stomp in rhythm. The godskin prelate in charge frowns at the unseemly sound and raises black flame to restore propriety. He counters with an angle. The flame skids and sulks. The prelate looks at him across a field of failed appetite and then very deliberately changes note. That change admits respect. "Mercy, Warden," the prelate asks. "We are artisans, our God is already dead. We only perfect hunger." "You are vandals with a vest," he says. He will not be captured by their rhetoric. "Drop your fire. Leave by the east stair. If you return, I cut your wrists and send you to learn to write with your feet." "Freedom versus doctrine," the prelate murmurs, almost pleased. Look how similar they are in hands that know. He would argue that line for a day, but the city breathes in behind him and needs out. He does not debate further. He shifts his weight, and the prelate sees the fight he will lose and chooses dignity over stubbornness. The godskins fold and depart like a well-drilled embarrassment. A third pressure arrives differently. Quiet, not urgent, but precise. It is a correction, and it is not Mo and not godskins. It is the will, sending a clause through the fingers the way a judge delivers a note to counsel. The mirror foe has permission to test. He expects it and makes space. The regent arrives on the colonnade above, without pageantry, perfect posture like a machine that loves its tolerance. He studies the clean plaza and the living children and the undamaged gate and makes a face he thinks looks like approval. It is actually envy. "See," he says, "sanction works. Think what you could do if you loved obedience." "I love results that don't multiply enemies," he says. "Fight me later. Today we hold a city." The regent attacks because he prefers to define later by winning now. They clash under the new rules. He cannot flare. The hymn will tax him. The regent is built to thrive under constraints. The fight is chess with knives. The first exchange winds up with the regent's blade at his throat, not biting, merely proving. The second finds his elbow under the regent's forearm and his leverage under the regent's concept. The third is messier. Nephili's axe checks the regent's ankle. The hinge's presence at the gate changes the geometry of a step, and he finds the regent's neck with an open palm. Options confined by sanction, but not zeroed. The regent freezes because the clause in his making prevents him from ignoring a superior hand in a superior place. He hates the clause. He relaxes because he loves obeying something when it is beautiful. "This is the city you want," the regent says softly, "where laws bend for you because you are correct. You are the very thing you say you won't be. I am bound now," he says. "That's why I can be here." The regent fades on a sigh that promises he will make a better argument when he arrives with allies who like math. The city exhales again. He looks down at his palms and reads the letters. Fence, mercy, audit trail, hinge. He repeats them to himself like a vow. The wound hums, content to be accounted for. Afternoon brings a different test. Gideon's water shows a farm at the city's edge where a minor Erdtree root emerges and feeds a well. A crowd forms, half with cups and half with torches, a fight everyone in Lanedale has had in their heads. Corhin asks for the warden's time. Goldmask stands behind him, sketching air and patience at the same speed. He goes. He stands on a cart because carts make honest pulpits. "The well is grace," a woman with 4 children says, her voice ragged with gratitude. "It keeps them from coughing blood at night." "The well is law," a man with a torch says, his voice taut with fear. It keeps them from changing when they are angry. Both are true, he says. Fence and use, no rights, no blood. Draw water for bodies without inviting doctrine into your bones. He draws a circle in dirt. This is the line. You pour here. You do not kneel here. If the god demands more, call me. That fence angers the will, Corin says, painfully honest. That fence keeps your people from becoming fuel, he says. If your god is angrier at fences than at dead children, your god needs a fence. Goldmask nods once. Acceptable, he says. For now. Permanent for as long as it works, he replies, deliberately refusing forever. Evening builds toward the thing he's felt coiling all day. An answer from the dynasty that does not want to be described as petty. A red moon rises before the sun is done. The sewers swell with a sound that is not water. Perfume won't handle this. Percussion won't. He opens his hand and calls the 4 uses of the new edge he was given by sanction. He counts them like coins and checks the bill. Mohg's projected altar under the capital, fed by stolen veins, demands one. He goes alone into the drain to pay. The ritual chamber laughs in filth. The dynasty priest from morning stands in a circle of his own blood, like a boy circling ants with chalk. The air above the circle distorts into a throne that thinks itself ingenious. Mohg's outline leans in, antlers of triumph, mouth like a wound that learned to talk. You are beloved now, the Lord of Blood says, rich and patient. Come to me. Let me show you law without shame. I've met your law, he says. It drowns children to prove they float. He holds the first of the 4 edges in front of his chest like a prayer, because it was given inside one. The edge is a slice of law, the right to seal a ritual from the outside without owning it. He moves it through the space like cutting a loaf he refuses to eat. Lines hiss. The circle stops being a circle. The throne sputters and goes still. Mohg's projection leans closer, amused now. You cut the loop, he purrs. You learn our tricks without admitting our god. I admit you like simple shapes, he says. I admit you like embarrassment when done to other people. Mohg laughs with real pleasure. I will eat your city's shame, he says conversationally. That is how dynasties are made. You will find less of it on the floor, he says, and seals the second line. The altar goes from obscene to stupid. The priest shrieks, not because a god leaves, but because attention leaves, and he is addicted to it. He runs. The chamber sighs as if relieved to be a room again. He has 2 edges left. He goes to the bridge and watches the city discover that it can survive assaults by doing small things correctly all day. He feels the will watching. He returns the favor by making his light obvious when he enforces fences and less than modest when he kills. He lets the hymn skim him twice and counts the drain. He can afford it. Night comes. The knives try one more time, braiding clever. He misdirects their invoice into a statue he chose in the morning because he knew he would need a sink. The statue blackens. The knives retreat with a mix of admiration and healthy malice. He keeps their names. He will need their skills later for an audit of a different god. The mirror foe appears one last time, not to fight, but to recite. 3 paths, the regent says, almost wistful. You walked the 3rd and stole from the 2nd a clause. He inclines his head because even copies know when a model outperforms. I will come when you err. I will be right, or I will be useful. High justice. You will come when men are tired, he says. I will be awake. The regent smiles the thin smile of function. I dislike you less, he admits, and vanishes like a doctrine that saw a better footnote. At midnight, he walks Landel with Nepheli and the hinge. The city is tired and alive. He passes the omen ward again. A little hand sticks out a window with a candle stub. He sees it and does not kneel this time. He lifts his hand and shows the braided sigil over his heart where wing and branch refuse to yield. The child nods because the picture is clear enough. He returns to the round table at dawn, not to ask permission, but to set precedent. Gideon is there with a ledger, Enya with her tapping, Corin holding a book like a man holds a cup in a storm. Goldmask points and does not look at anyone. Claws read, he says. I obeyed, I disobeyed, I notified. Mercy first, force audited, fences made, 2 edges spent, 2 in reserve. My wound holds, your people held, your enemies now respect labor. Gideon writes, and does not smile because professionalism is a lens. You will leave a mark, he says, on us, on me. You will resist it, he says. I will imitate it, Gideon says, surprising himself. Enya listens to the fingers, then to herself. The will accepts, she breathes. It says continue. It says be seen. It says remember your claws when it is inconvenient. Corin bows his head. You amended a world, he says. May the next man who tries not have cause to curse your margins. Goldmask whispers, adequate, and draws a line that is almost elegant enough to be mercy. Nephili leans her axe on her shoulder and bumps his arm with her elbow. Lord, she says, testing the title on him the way a smith tests a new alloy. Do we eat? We eat, he says, honest and human. Then we go to work. They do. Not with fire, with lists. Fence 3 more nodes. Train 5 more wardens. Teach 4 children to draw lines around wells. Pay a visit to a smith who beats iron with a rhythm that makes law nervous. Write a letter to a far scholar whose book will be needed when dragons forget their humility. Leave a sealed instruction at the second gate. If the prelate returns, insult him before you fight him. It saves time. He stands that afternoon in a square where a statue of a general whose name is lost points at a horizon that has moved closer. He looks at the Erdtree and refuses to flatter it. He looks at the city and refuses to pity it. He looks at his hands and refuses to hate them. He is a warden with a wound and a job. He goes to the divine bridge at dusk because even warden days like circles. The wind tastes less like brass today, more like bread. He watches gold fall over stone like a promise that this place will not be cheap to take. That is the promise he wanted. The next morning, he sends a small party toward Gatefront to teach soldiers there the percussion trick. He sends another to twin churches on a ridge to persuade monks that ritual smoke does better work as a disinfectant than a devotion. He sends a note to Malekith by leaving a shard of dragon bone at a shrine. Seen, respected, declined. He considers sending a knife to Moog and decides he should not flatter him so early. He writes in water to Gideon. Tell Renala her priest can fence and still see the moon. The day after that, a crucible knight stands beside him on the bridge ununited and silent, in the way men stand when they hope to be asked to stay. He nods and the knight nods, and a doctrine turns into a tool for an afternoon. The day after that, a godskin seamster leaves a bundle at a fence, linen stitched so small they would shame kings. He has them made into bandages and gives them to perfumers to roll around arms that cut the right things. The day after that, the sewers are quiet, and the dragons fly higher, and the mirror in a palace room cracks, because a copy refused to lie. He dreams once of his throne and wakes angry and correct, and the letters on his palms burn and then cool. He sends a thought back along the thread that leads to the Astronomicon. This law has been pruned, this one preserved, this impulse fenced, this one studied for adoption. He lists costs, he lists names, he does not beg, he does not boast. On the 7th day, the fingers tap a different rhythm, and Aeneas smiles because the will has decided he was not a mistake. She wipes her eyes with a dignity that makes Nephili look away out of respect. Gideon writes Warden at the top of a page and underlines it twice and puts the page aside where important pages go. When they must be consulted later, Corinne copies a clause into a book that will be the heresy some future priest needs to save a life. Goldmask points at the sky and draws a line that bends just slightly, as if it had learned about mercy. He walks the bridge and sees the city not as a set of targets or a portfolio of risks, but as a machine that can learn. And he smiles the way men smile when they are not being watched by gods. In Caelid, a rot angel looks up at a sky that refuses to clap and vows to make it cough. In mountaintops of the giants, something stirs under snow that wants to replace charity with kindling. In Nokron, a star sighs and corrects an orbit, and knives take notes. In Mulgwyn, a lord sips and imagines how shame tastes when it is served with bread, and he licks his lips because he is a patient man. In Farumazula, Maliketh turns a page that has no hinge and shakes his head because men are stupid and sometimes correct. In the capital, a child stands on her door's threshold with her candle, and when wind blows it, she cups it with 2 hands and holds it steady and thinks of a tall man who returned it to her, and of fences that keep water honest. He steps away from the parapet and looks up at the Erdtree one more time. The golden leaves stir in a wind that is more policy than weather. He salutes once with 2 fingers, the way he salutes engines that work. The tree does not answer. He prefers that. He turns toward work and into legend made of checklists, and he moves like a man whose God is a ledger and whose prayer is a fence and whose faith is paid in cities that outlive their enemies.